Hello, everyone. I'm Maura Barrett, NBC News correspondent. Welcome to our discussion on storytelling in film. I'm so excited to bring you this panel on storytelling in movies and documentary filmmaking. We have an amazing discussion lined up with some of our truly stellar directors and producers. Joining me today from Atlanta, Will Packer, producer of movies like Ride Along, Night School, and his new NBC Universal movie, Beast. And here in studio in Los Angeles, Joel Crawford, director of Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, Januel Mercado, co-director of Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, Amanda Spain, vice president of MSNBC Films, and Louis Leterrier, directing the latest in the Fast and Furious franchise, Fast 10. Thank you so much for joining me. I have so many questions to ask all of you, but I also want to encourage our audience to drop any questions they have for our panel in that Q&A box on the right side of your screen. We'll also be taking questions from our students at both Florida International University and near Los Angeles from Cal State Fullerton and El Camino College. Now, guys, this is a summit on storytelling, and you all focus on very different aspects and different types of storytelling. So just to kick us all off, and I'll start with Will, when you're looking at a movie or a film that you're looking to produce, what's the #1 thing that has to be in it in order to make it a great story?
First of all, hey, everybody there in the studio. Wish I could be there. But,
hey, Will.
Love the technology. Hey, guys, what's happening? Only bad thing is that you guys have to wear pants. That's the difference between our kids today.
Peanut butter and jealous.
It's a great question about storytelling, and I think you asked the element that has to be in the story. For me, it's about the compulsion for the audience. It needs to be compelling, right? Because these days, especially with an oversaturation of content, there needs to be a proposition within whatever content you're making, whatever story you're telling, that is a must-see, must engage with. Now, doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be something that all audiences want to engage with. But for me, I definitely want to make something that has a specific audience that is going to engage and say, that is for me. So when you think about storytelling, of course, just from a structural standpoint, you want to make sure that you hit them at the beginning, you leave them feeling a certain way at the end, and hopefully the middle doesn't let you down. For me, I'm always thinking about that audience. I'm thinking about the end user. I'm thinking about the experience of seeing and enjoying whatever the content is, whether it's a television show or movie, whatever it is. I'm thinking about that audience. So I'm saying, what are the elements I have to make this a must-see that is really going to compel that audience to engage? Because these days, they simply don't have to. They have too many choices.
Yeah, I mean, audience, especially when you're looking at a movie like what you're working on, Will, has got to be such a broad audience. I mean, is that the same for you, Joel and Januel? Like, are you thinking about a more specific audience, or when you're looking at an animated film like Puss in Boots, I mean, what are you thinking about really needs to pop in terms of the storytelling? Joel, I'll start with you.
Yeah, there's a lot of similar things to Will, what you were just saying, where when you approach a project, I think first it has to be personal for you. Like, you got to find your way in of like, why are we making this? Like, what is it saying? And then it's kind of in animation, it feels like you can go so many different directions. You're creating worlds. And so I think for us, it really comes down to like, when we know the story, we're like, how's the best way to tell that? And you're kind of creating even a look, like with Puss in Boots, this like painterly style which hadn't been done before. And so you can kind of create like whatever paints the picture for the audience. And so I think that it's a personal aspect, but then also, yeah, what's the entertainment? What's the aesthetic? I don't know what.
I agree. No, yeah, like Will nailed it with the compelling story and characters, and Joel with finding your avenue in with a personal connection. And then just to get specific with just the personal sensibilities, I always love it when our stories, specifically like our kind of movie tastes, when you combine, when you have contrast and you can combine silliness and absurdity with emotion and heart.
And Amanda, you're working with a completely different type of story with documentaries. When you're looking over something that you're looking to produce, I mean, what are you looking to stand out when it comes to storytelling in the doc style?
Well, I think it's very similar to narrative. It has to be something that really connects with you. I think it's something that you have to deeply care about. Documentaries are really hard to make. They take a very long time. So I think if you're not really invested in the story, you probably won't stick with it. So for me, when I'm looking for the directors we're going to work with or the stories we're going to tell, I want to make sure that all the people involved are really connected and really care about it. And I think the other thing that is really important for us is to build empathy. It's like to really connect to the humanity in our world, and we really look for stories that do that, because documentary filmmaking is a really great place to do that.
And then, Louis, I'm sure a lot of that is overlapped with what you're focusing on, but when you're looking at an action film like Fast 10, I mean, what else are you looking to really pop?
Well, I mean, we're lucky because we are passionate about our jobs. We are audience members before we are storytellers. So we are looking for the stuff that's going to connect with us. The idea of doing Puss in Boots or working on these documentaries, or myself like taking on this giant franchise that is going to be seen all around the world for years and years, you just have, it's a huge responsibility, but you have to bring your special something, and you have to bring this thing that you hope is going to connect with the audience. I mean, it goes through you. The difficulty with, I was asking Joel and John, I was asking them how long it takes them to make a movie. It takes them 3 years to make a movie. You have to think about what's going to hit the zeitgeist 3 years from now. It's very difficult. It's not like an instantaneous thing where like you react to what's cool these days. You have to think about this. So that's also the idea of storytelling. Like you have to think about what will be received well in 2 years, but also what will last forever. Because that is a huge task.
So you all have crystal balls hidden in order to pull that off, because that's such a long time to forecast in the future. I want to turn next to a pre-submitted question from Anna Linberry at the University of Arizona. She taped this ahead of the panel today.
My question is for Joel and Januel. How do you take a story that may be perceived to be for kids and have it appeal to such a wide range of audience? Thank you.
Well, that's a great question from Anna, because
Thank you, Anna.
and that kind of question in a way comes up a lot. There's this idea, especially I think in the West, that animation is just a specific medium for kids. Mm-hmm. And for us, you can tell any story with animation, and that's the beautiful thing about its filmmaking. And that, for us, we looked at, when we approached Puss in Boots, we said there's this nugget of an idea that Puss in Boots he's a cat on his 9th life. That's absurd, that's silly. And then the more we talked about it, we said, this is a movie that is about one life. As human beings, we all just are gifted with one life. And really, out of that, we're like, we need to tell this story authentically, so that people kind of are brought in on the fun, but there's this heart that carries with them. And so I think the reason this movie has appealed to not only families and kids, but also 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, like it's actually been embraced by a large audience. I think it's because we don't kind of water it down or talk down. We expect the audience to come up to it. And so I think that's something, we just tried to be authentic when we're telling the story. I don't know.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. Just to add to it, because the broader message, and this is something that us storytellers are always talking about, of what are you trying to communicate? And with this film, it was the message of appreciating life and what makes a meaningful life. So with that being the core idea, we wanted to make sure that was what everything in the story was pointing to, and it didn't matter what age you were, that you, as humans, could relate to this emotionally.
Right, because at the end of the day, if we're all humans, we can identify with it, and then your movie's got an even broader reach, right?
Yeah, when there's some challenging...
So, but it starts with something very, very small and very simple. I mean, your idea, your movie, which I love, by the way, their movie has the best 10 first minutes of any movie in the last 3 years. I mean, it's amazing. I want to see your movie again. I saw it 3 times. So let me tell you. But it started with something very simple, very understandable that relates to animation, to cats, but also to human beings in general. And so you can, that's your way in, and that really was your way in. Very simple, and then you unfold, and it's very layered, and the characters are amazing, and the directing is amazing.
Clearly. That's a great point. Thanks, Louis. We've got another question from Vanessa at Cal State Fullerton. Hi, Vanessa. What's your question?
Hi guys, my name is Vanessa, student from Cal State Fullerton. My question is for Joelle and Januel. How are you guys able to effectively pull the heartstrings for all audiences in your storytelling?
Question.
Yeah, it's something where, like, as we're working on the movie, and you're constantly in editorial reworking the movie in animation. We have like storyboards. We have we're kind of compiling these scenes and putting them together. Where when we're watching it, we're going, "What's the emotion?" It's like a roller coaster where we think of it kind of like the character's the car on the roller coaster, and the track is the emotion of the audience. And sometimes that car is lined up with the character. Like in the case of Puss in Boots, we really were trying to go, let's have the audience see, like, enjoy, like, Puss in Boots living. He's this kind of heroic character who's living his best life, but the audience feels his flaw, that he thinks he's going to live forever. And so, like, tugging on heartstrings comes down to, like, what's the feeling, like, for example, when Puss is in the bar with the wolf, that we're like, this is kind of a new tone we're introducing. I think audiences weren't expecting, like, that it goes to like a grim fairy tale, something that's a little bit scarier. And I think those kind of surprising emotions kind of bring the audience in. I don't know what else you think, but
No, I agree. And going back to Joel, what you were talking about, that personal way in, with Puss in Boots, we wanted to explore his vulnerability and get more subtle performances and examine those flaws. And I think that was just an example of accessing heartstrings, and that people could relate to that because we're all flawed and we've all make mistakes. And just in that example, like, it was really appealing. And what Will was talking about earlier, like, what was compelling about Puss in this story was that he had regrets and these flaws, and he made mistakes, and that was what we wanted to explore, get deeper into the character and see them grow.
What's so great about stories like that too is that it opens up, especially when you can watch things with your family, like something like Puss in Boots, where you can relate to it as an adult and your kids relate to it, but it opens up these deeper conversations about mortality, really tough conversations to have about mortality and anxiety and fear. And that's what I love about all these stories, is that it creates moments where we get to have time to share and really connect and understand in a deeper way what we're all really experiencing as people, right? Which is what is crazy that a cat can make you feel that thing, right? Or a person that you meet in a documentary who you would never think you would relate to can make you feel that thing, where you can go, oh wait, we're all kind of connected. We're all really relatable. Like, we all feel and are afraid of the same things. And that's really the magic of storytelling, is that it brings us all together, and I think makes us feel less alone, which is really, I think, what's so profound and beautiful for what we get to do.
And I think in that same vein, separate from fiction. Oh, sorry, Will, do you want to add?
Well, I just was enjoying what Amanda was saying, and I think that's a great point. I'm somebody that truly believes in the power of storytelling. She brought up something that's really apropos for this conversation, which is how stories connect us. We're more connected now than we've ever been before, right, in the world. We can now have, immediate social conversations with people that are on the far ends of the globe. It is that relatability. It is that common thread in a good story that makes somebody, some person, something, some animal relatable, right? Because if you make movies and you make content that truly feel inclusive and not exclusive, right? Feel like stories that can be relatable to a variety of audiences. Now you break down some barriers that have been there before in terms of, gender or ethnicity or demographic. Now it's just about what is a good story, but you got to do it well. It's got to be powerful. It's got to be relatable to a broad swath of people. So I just wanted to echo Amanda's point there.
No, I think that's incredibly important. But I think also, Amanda, in the work that you're doing, on the flip side, from animation or anything that's fiction, you're dealing with nonfiction, real life characters that might still provoke hard conversations, that might be hard for people to identify with. How do you go about laying out their story arc from a perspective
Right.
so that audiences can identify with it?
Well, that takes really good directors and editors. In my space, like a lot of, the directors go out and they think sometimes they know the story, but a really good documentary director has to follow what's in front of them and not go with an idea in mind. They have to really be flexible. And then when they get into the bay with the editors and they work, it's a very symbiotic relationship between the directors and the editors. A lot of the story is found in the edit, and we're talking sometimes 700 hours of footage that, you have to piece together, and it's like a Tetris, really, sometimes trying to make it all work together. So it's complicated and it's difficult, but then sort of the sweet spot magic happens where you start to lay out sometimes the first cut could be 5 hours, which is insane. And then you start to see it get down and the story becomes very clear, but it takes a while to get through that fog. And I think that that's why really great documentary directors and editors, it's a special skill to take real stories and really have the beginning, middle, and end come together in a way that is magical and poetic. And I'm lucky that a lot of the ones we work with do it really well. They make me look good.
Experts in condensing, right, and telling the highlight.
But we're all sort of doing this. We're all, and you are the prime example, but, we'll same thing. We seize the moment. We surround ourselves with great collaborators, with great actors, with great talent. And then these people will give us surprises, accidents, moments that we weren't expecting. We seize it. You guys get to redo and do until it's done. I keep finding the movie comes out I have to lock everything in 3 weeks. Yeah. But I keep finding ideas and switching and everything just to make it better, right, Will? I mean, same thing for you, right? Sort of like we all find those moments. We all seize those moments, and that is truly storytelling for all of us, right, Will?
Yeah, and Will, I want to have a question. We've got a question from the audience, and I want to direct this to you. Caesar's asking, is there an effort to tell more LGBTQ plus stories in family-friendly feature films?
Oh, absolutely, always. Because, as I said before, we're telling stories that we want to travel to the entire world. And one of the things that I like about recent endeavors into filmmaking is that people are making a very intentional choice to be more inclusive. We say that we want to have films that reach all audiences. Hollywood has said that for a very long time, but didn't really do it, didn't really practice it in the same way, right? I want my movies to travel around the world. I want people all over the world. But a lot of times it meant I want, you white heterosexual men to watch my movie all around the world and see themselves on the screen, right? And that's not what we're here to do. We're here to show inclusive stories. And that doesn't mean that every story has to have some big message or has to lead with look at how diverse and inclusive we are. That's not the point. The point is to show real people in real situations, and it doesn't matter whether they've got a disability or are orientated differently than somebody that you may be sitting next to. The power of what we do is to bring people together by allowing us to share other folks' perspectives. So yes, absolutely. Whether we're talking about LGBT plus, whether we're talking about minorities, disenfranchised communities, or whether it's not about any of that. Make stories that have rich, well-rounded people that are flawed. They're not too great. They're not too bad. They're like real people. That's the thing. Once we're showing all types of people as real people, then as an industry, we win. And as storytellers, we've done our job.
Yeah, that's an incredible point, and that inclusivity is huge. I want to turn now to NBC's Guad Venegas with a question from a student at Florida International University. Hey, Guad.
Hey, we're going to speak to one of our juniors who studies multimedia production. Aquiles Barreto has a question about the creative process. Aquiles, go ahead.
Yeah. So as directors that are part of franchise movies, how do you guys manage to add your own twist to movies that are part of a larger universe?
Lou, you want to kick that one off?
Why me? Okay, it's the 10th film. How do you make it? No, well, I mean, again, bringing new blood, finding there's such a strong foundation with the Fast and Furious movies, such a huge community of fans that have given you feedback over the years. So you know what they like, you really know what they don't like, they're very vocal. So what you want to do is you want to please them, but also you want to surprise them. So you bring new ideas, you sort of you bring some memories of the past, but you twist it, you make it surprising, you reinterpret the movies, the 9 other movies, and say, you think you saw it this way, well, think about it in this angle and make it very interesting. So that actually deepens everything that you've seen, makes all the other movies very important, and a great rewatch leading up to this movie. And then you have fun. And then, as directors, we always want to bring the thing that's never been done before. So, I will do some shots in my movie that have never been done before. But also, it's not so much about the technique, the technology. Sometimes it's really about the moment, the characters, an interaction that you have never seen in a type of a movie like this. Twist it, make it fun, make it a great fun experience. These movies are, as you guys said, rides. They are rides, but they are rides that you want to leave the theater with something. You want to go home and and have learned something or take it home. Having conversation with the Fast family, Vin Diesel and gang, it's just literally it's been a quarter of a century, making these movies. So families have been born, families of fans have been born, and these movies every 2 years are communions for family. They come, they meet, they experience the evolution of this family, this on-screen family, and they can relate their own family to these guys. Less driving, less punching, less action. But we can still save the world in a very small way.
You can do both.
We can do both. Staying home and
that's funny.
changing.
Louis, it's funny because when we took on Puss in Boots, it's a sequel to a spin-off.
Right.
That was it's essentially the 6th movie in the Shrek world. And we're that's a lot to figure out. Where do you pick up? But 10. Okay, we got nothing on you. But it's interesting because it's that approach of where are we going to take this story that's somewhere new? And I think for us, because when we're coming into the Shrek world, it had been expanded and all these fun characters had been introduced. And we saw an opportunity, a lot of times sequels will expand out. And we saw an opportunity in who Puss in Boots was because he was set up. He's a spin-off character because he came in as a sidekick. And he was always fun, and Antonio Banderas is so charismatic and charming. And but Puss in Boots was always this kind of perfect character. And we kind of said, well, instead of expanding out on the sequel, we should go more in, where let's show the world a side of Puss in Boots that we haven't seen because he's a sidekick. And Antonio got really excited about the idea of taking someone who looks like a hero, who looks like this person is not afraid, has no flaws, and showing that even heroes have flaws, have vulnerabilities. And that was kind of our way in, I think, in this unique case.
And a type of character development in that too, and the audience getting to become more intimate with the sidekick character.
Absolutely, yeah.
General, did you have anything else to add?
Oh, I'm good. That was perfect.
So we got another question kind of pivoting from all of that for Amanda. A lot of documentaries rely heavily on seated interviews or narration. So what are some of those visual tools that you and documentary filmmakers really need to factor in when you're thinking about visual storytelling?
It's funny, listening to them talk, I was thinking about how I think a lot of us really turn to the world of narrative to find inspiration, because I think one of the hardest things about the subject matter in documentaries, it's often dark. It's often things that we have to deal with in our communities and in society that really picking up the rock, right? But you also want people to watch. And if they're afraid to watch because they think it might be too hard, I think it's really important to find a way to make them entertaining. And that's something we have a lot of discussions about, is how can we make these subject matters entertaining? We did a film called Lone Wolves, which is a comedic look at student loan debt. You would never think that student loan debt would be funny, and it's not funny. I mean, it's crushing a lot of Americans that are suffering under the weight of student loan debt. But there's 2 lines written into the 1998 educational bill that makes student loan debt the only debt that cannot be forgiven by bankruptcy. So the director goes on a hunt to find out who got those 2 lines written into the bill, and it's sort of like a caper, and it's really fun and exciting. And the whole time you're learning about this really serious problem. So I think like that's what we're really looking to do, is find ways to make documentaries not the kind we grew up with, you know, not the ones where people are like, oh, I have to watch a documentary? Like, no, they're like, yeah. I mean, and luckily for us, it is a genre that is growing and the audience is really starting to respond to. So I'm in the golden era of it, they say, but we want to keep going and make it even more entertaining and accessible to people.
Because it's entertaining, but also informational, and people can really take something.
Yeah, you've got to really strike the balance,
Yeah.
right? Because you don't want to be disrespectful to the subject either. So I think that that's always the mental gymnastics we're doing in the genre.
Right, right. And then I want to go to Louis. I mean, with all of this, this storytelling is a visual medium. There are so many strong visuals in Fast 10 that you work with. How do you work with your stunt, action, visual effects teams to make sure that the story that you're looking to tell is all in one line and makes sense, but is still conveying the story that you're looking for the audience to connect with while also being entertained?
But that's a good point. You never leave sight of your story and your characters. So that's the idea. You know, when I jumped onto Fast 10, I went to see the cast. I was like, great news, guys, and bad news, you're going to be in every stunt and fight scene. So, you know, the actors, I mean, that's why these actors are, you know, the best in the world and have lasted forever, is that they're very willing. So when Vin Diesel is driving, he's really driving. When Jason Momoa is driving, same thing. When they're fighting, same thing. Charlize Theron and Michelle Rodriguez, there's you'll see a fight, and they did everything. I mean, it's insane, except for one very perilous, and you'll understand which I'm talking about. But they were battered and bruised. But that's the idea. You keep your actors in it. You make it very safely. I mean, and we should talk about this as a producer, because he's doing this movie, and Beast is an amazing, incredible movie where Idris Elba is like doing most of his stuff. I think it's exactly this. Never lose sight of your story and your character. And then you can bring visuals, stack up the deck, do whatever you want. If the audience, if you're on the ride with your characters, the audience will stay on the ride, and that's the idea. That really is the key thing for you guys too. That's why this first 10 minutes are incredible. It's all about character, but also visual. And you stack it up, and the audience is on. It doesn't go like, here's a 10 minutes of story, and then we go for a great fight scene. No, it's like story leads into fight scene, but you don't know when one starts and the other one stops. And Will, same thing for you, right? Correct? It's the same idea.
Yeah. Well, let's bring you back in, because tell me about how you think about that as you're looking to produce a film, to have those different elements, play all together. I think we had heard in a podcast expeditiously that you see yourself as a general manager of a sports team, and you're really figuring out who can make what plays in each role, right? Can you kind of expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, I love my sports analogies. First, Louis is absolutely on point. If your audience cares and is invested in the characters, they will follow them anywhere, period. If they care and are invested, they will follow them to the moon and beyond, to the depths of the sea, anywhere in between, right? If they're not invested in the characters, I don't care what you do visually. I don't care what tools you try to throw at them. I don't care what the elements are that are provocative and splashy. If they don't care about the characters, it's not going to matter. It's not going to stick. They're not going to be invested in them. When I was making the general manager analogy with the sports team, I was saying that a producer is like the person who has to macro manage and put the right people in the right positions with the right tools in order to win. So with the sports team, you can have your great quarterback, but if you don't have the line to protect them or the receivers to throw to, it's not going to matter. So my job, I think of myself as somebody that has to put all the elements in place in order for this final production, this final content that we're creating to work on multiple levels. And so whether it's my director, my star, of course, my script, my editing team, camera team, all those people are essential to tell a story the right way. So even for my people that hate sports, right? Forget all of that. Just think of it as a big project manager. Your project is not going to work if you don't have the right elements and the right people to execute upon the vision. And it's different for every project. because different people have different skill sets. So you got to line up the skill sets with the talent that you're putting around a particular project with the intention of that project. All projects are made the same. All projects don't have the same intention. They're not tonally, the same. There's a wide variety of stories that we all tell. As a producer, in my capacity, I got to make sure that I'm putting the right folks in the right position to win for that particular project, and it's different every time.
And not to make another sports analogy, but I think in the industry that we're all working in, it takes a team. It's a team sport to get the production off the ground. At least that's how it is on my end in news, too.
Very true.
But I do have another question, from our audience. Edward sent in a question and asked, what are the most exciting things about animation that can't be done in live action? Joel, do you want to kick this one off?
It's interesting. Like, I feel like the lines of animation and live action are getting progressively more blurred, and I think that's a great thing. That it's about filmmaking. What can you do where can you take an audience emotionally, and like with animation, I'll say something unique that we found on Puss in Boots was as we were delving into Puss's character, where we were like, let's show how anxiety is affecting Puss in Boots. And we kind of organically came into a scene where Puss is paralyzed by fear and has essentially a panic attack. I do think there's something beautiful about animation that, because you're watching a talking cat wearing boots have a panic attack, and then a dog wearing a sock comes in and puts his head on his belly. I think there's something that reaches everybody, that because you're not seeing an adult man or a woman or a child, that it's kind of universal in a way, and audiences connect to that panic attack because it's just about the emotion that this fantastical kind of medium is presenting. And in a way, I think in it being so absurd and fantastical, it has a way of disarming all ages, all different people, all walks of life, and unifying them in the same emotion at the same moment. And so it's hard to say. I don't think there's any limits on live action or animation, but I think that's a special case where you go, this connected with such a broad audience, where people were saying, I've never seen a panic attack depicted like that. And being able to just use film to, Puss has a shortness of breath, and all he can hear is his heartbeat, and you have the audio. It's like that, that just takes over of that heartbeat. And then this kind of really shallow lenses we're using, where you're just feeling that Puss is not actually able to see. And then you're left with the only thing he has left, which is connection. And when the dog lays his head on his stomach, the audience kind of unified, feels that moment. So I think it's more about the magic of filmmaking than it is what animation can and can't do.
And I mean, in the example you just gave, the fact that it can take something that a lot of people can relate to and normalize it if it's something they're not familiar with through animation, and maybe make it a little less scary, I assume.
Yeah, and maybe start conversations that, I think back to what we were talking about of these movies take so long, whether live action, documentary, fiction, or animation, the crystal ball of how will what we're creating now be timely when it comes out? And I think for us, we were saying, this movie about mortality, but essentially appreciating life, couldn't be more timely than what everybody's been through for the last few years. And more than just even adults, kids had their whole world turned upside down. And they experience things, but maybe don't know how to address it. And we're like, maybe by portraying anxiety in a heroic character, kids can maybe start a dialogue with their parents, or vice versa. And I think that's the hope with any kind of storytelling, that
it's timely, but it's also timeless. It's and borderless. It's as a Frenchman now directing Hollywood movies, like, you know, and I've done it both ways, and you know, I did French projects that came through, but I feel it's interesting just to speak to the world and speak to everyone all at once for eternity. I mean, your movie is going to be seen forever, and I think, you know, Fast 10, same thing. You know, your documentary, same thing. They have there's a time stamp. Obviously, it's of 2023, but there's this idea of like you watch it in 10 years, and then you're like, oh, it's still, you know, it still talks about humans, about the human heart.
Yeah, you're right.
About something, you know, you relate.
Yeah, I mean, people are always going to have panic attacks. I mean, I think that's just the reality. Like, I know. I'm having one right now.
I was hoping that this would solve it all.
But yeah, but I think that's because of that. That's a story that's going to live on for a long time. And like 20 years from now, someone's going to watch that movie and say, "Oh, that's what I'm going through right now." And animation is something that's really we're using in documentaries more and more now too. I mean, I don't know if you've had a chance to see Flea, but it's all animated.
Yes.
Like, and animation has created the ability for us in the documentary space to tell the stories that you might not be able to capture, like if they're in zones that you can't get to, or there wasn't a news crew following that story 30 years ago. So we're starting to use animation more and more, and it's super exciting for us too. And we're taking inspiration from our, you know, people narrative world, because again, I think we're all sort of working together to make better stories.
Yeah. And really quick, John, I want to make sure, is there any perspective that you've been thinking about in terms of where animation can tell something differently than live action? I just want to make sure we get your take
no,
into.
it's interesting because I was agreeing with Joel where it's like I don't see it where it can't do, each medium can't do what the other, like what Joel's saying. I feel like it's all kind of the same now, and it's interesting because like when we first started with Shrek, it was very realistic, and I remember seeing it in theaters and being blown away, like, wow, look at the pores on his face and the freckles and everything is so lifelike, and that was so interesting to see at the time of the medium of animation trying to get closer to live action, and then as technology advanced and as storytelling evolved, now we're in this revolutionary period where now we're starting to re-implement 2D elements and going back to traditional animation, but not entirely actually finding a way to fuse it together. Just like what you were saying, Amanda, with now using animation to push the documentary storytelling, we're doing the same thing of like going back and seeing like older elements and various types of filmmaking that we look at to inspire us to make old feel new.
Yeah, just like another dose of creativity in it all. Nice. Let's turn again to NBC's Glad Venegas with another question from a student down at Florida International University. Hey, Glad.
Hey, we have a question from one of our broadcast journalism seniors. This is more of a personal question for the panelists. Here's Gabriela Perez.
As I'm an inspiring journalist wanting to get into the film and entertainment industry, what is one piece of advice you wish you knew before getting into the specific field?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, great question.
Does anyone feel inspired to start it off?
Well, maybe Will. He's the senior. He's the adult in the room.
Throw to him.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Good question, Gabriella. And what's up to everybody down there in Florida? I'm from Florida, Florida native. I went to Florida A&M up in Tallahassee, a little bit north of you guys. So hey to my FIU friends. You know what's interesting about that question is that I actually think that I benefited from what I didn't know. I will be honest with you. I think that if I knew everything when I first started off that I knew now, I don't think I would have done this career. I think I might have done something else. I came in with like this, you know, kind of whimsical naivete about, you know, what I was going to be able to do, how soon I was going to be able to do it, the levels I would be able to you know, attain at a certain point. And none of that turned out to be true. It was so much harder, so much more difficult. I knew it would be hard, but I think that I had to go through it and learn as I was going through it. And so I guess my advice to you would be, don't be afraid of the unknown. Don't be afraid of what you don't know. There's not one piece of advice that me or anybody on this panel can give you that's going to be like, oh, I got it. That's it. it's click, that's all I need to know. No, you're gonna have to go out. It's kind of like, if you're a mountain climber, you say, I want to climb a mountain, and you got the right shoes and the rope and you got your water bottle and all your tools, right? But until you actually start climbing the mountain, right, and a rock slips, and your gloves, don't grab the right rock, and you gotta adjust, and you gotta be malleable, you gotta make decisions on the fly. Until you're in that moment, you don't actually know what it is that you're going to have to do for your particular situation. So I just think there's power in the unknown, and I look back at myself and what I didn't know, and I'm kind of glad that I didn't. But I will say, be fearless about it. Whatever it is, you said you want to be a journalist, go for it, be fearless. There are going to be all kind of challenges, but that's okay. That's part of it. That's par for the course. My advice would just be to be fearless and relentless in the pursuit of your passion.
And Will, we've got some emphatic nods over here. And we're going to get to come back and talk more about career tips as well, considering we're talking to students and people in all stages of their career. But is there anything else you want to add? Anything on that?
I mean, it's just going, that's such great advice and something you were saying, Will, of like, just enjoy the journey of like when you start working, I think there's a lot of questions that you have of like, we both started off as storyboard artists, and there's the thing of like you're trying to bring yourself into the role of like whatever you're doing, you want to bring kind of your voice, but at the same time, live action, animation, everything is very collaborative, and so you have to learn to be a part of that. And what I just kind of connected to, Will, was that it's like being in the moment, enjoying the journey of creating. And like, I know as an early artist, I was, questioning like, what's my style? And I think that's a common thing when people are in like film school or like, what's my voice even? And I think being in the moment, enjoying just the experience, your style, if you call it like, is a sum total of your strengths, your flaws, your hobbies, your interests, your life experience. And so the more you just do, like you said, like be fearless, you acquire your way of seeing the world and telling stories, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And for those of you watching at home, remember, if you do have any more questions for our panelists, we still got lots of time. So put them in the Q&A section on the right side of your screen, and we'll be able to get to them more throughout the discussion. And on that note, we do have another question from Corey at El Camino College. Hi, Corey. What's your question?
Hi. Yeah, my question is for Joel and Januel. In a previous interview, Joel, you mentioned that Puss in Boots: The Last Wish draws inspiration from Japanese anime such as Akira. And my question for both of you is, what unique storytelling devices does anime bring to, or can anime bring to Western films? And also, what are your thoughts about the current state of anime and film in general?
That's a fun one.
I think, Joel and I are big anime fans. And as Corey was asking and pointing out, and I think the cinematography and the visual storytelling of anime stories and series is really what stood out to us, because they were just really pushing like the emotion through the camera angles, right? Like wide lens. And then when we talk about like fusing again 2D elements and 3D elements, we started treating all these like CG almost these CG assets like 2D, like you take like the Puss in Boots model, and usually in 2D you draw it out where you could like stretch out the foot and make it really big towards camera, and now we were like implementing these 2D techniques on 3D and breaking the model so that it looked good in the composition frame as you see with a 2D animated drawing.
Yeah, I think back to the like not trying to replicate real life in CG, but like anime does. It's the fights are so turned up, right? But not only that, I think like sometimes like it's so cool what anime has become. Essentially, sometimes working because of limitations even and efficiency, like anime would hold drawings for a while, and you'd get internal kind of monologues of characters. and then save all of the animation for the fight scenes. And just by working with limitations, anime has evolved a storytelling sensibility that is different than, I'd say, like a Western sensibility, and it's just great to like kind of that it has influenced so much, I'd say, in the West. And for us, just being able to go, the focus of where are you spending your time? What does this mean for the audience? And so whether, like for us, when Puss is going to feel fear for the first time fighting a wolf, like we need to use kind of inspiration from anime to turn up that fight scene so the audience feels like, whoa, I haven't felt this before. Or to just hold and not have much animation because it's more about the vista of a shot and that has the emotion, a meaning. So there's so much beyond just the cool style of anime that I really think there's storytelling sensibilities that are just unique to, I'd say, the East that we just appreciate.
On that note, I'll just jump in with one more thing, addressing Corey's thing of like, what the influence of anime on Western and the state of it right now. We also love that the tonal shifts that anime storytelling has been able to accomplish, because you can get these really like goofy, wacky expressions, veiny foreheads, blood shooting out of the nose, and then the next moment you'll have a scene where it's a deep existential crisis that a character is going through. And as you've seen in our movies, we love being able to play with the tone and provide that with all our stories of having an emotional roller coaster, right? With the highs and lows, the comedy and the drama.
Yeah, and I think going back to what Will was talking about earlier in terms of inclusion, this is a way of merging these cultures in a new and updated story. On that note, or I want to know if there's any other elements you're considering, Louis, but we've got another question from the audience for you. Elaine asks, what makes a script and film franchise keep fans coming back?
Characters. It is all about characters. It's about the right actor playing the right character, and these characters being relatable. What we all do is having primary characters, but also a lot of secondary characters, because that's the ideal. So it's like having a global understanding of humanity, and that doesn't happen with one singular character, and that's why we surround them with just amazing characters. And that's why this franchise has grown to just a choral of orchestra of amazing talent, because everybody comes in wanting to add to the giant edifice that is Fast and Furious. And I think we do this, but with documentary must be the same thing of these secondary characters are as important as these primary characters. But scripts, to be pretentious for 1 second, François Truffaut said, you write your script, but then you fight your script when shooting it, and then you fight the shoot when editing it. You always play that sort of tug of war between what was expected and what was delivered, and then ultimately it's what feels true to you. Going back to the very beginning is what feels true to you. And I love, can I say one thing about Will's analogy of the mountain that he answered? I love this idea of the mountain that you climb, because it's your mountain. You have a goal. You have your goal, whether it's a personal goal, filmmaking goal. But that goal, there's different ways to reach the summit of the mountain. But at the very top, that's your summit. It's the achievement of your own personal experience. It's not like what you want the others to feel about you is what you feel about yourself. So you can set yourself to be a producer, director, anything. But then at the end, finish and do something completely different. You will be happy. Do it with passion. Do it with gusto. Do it with just give it all. Give it all to your audience, right? That's what we do, right?
Carving your literal own path.
And you'll find your own truth giving it.
I was just going to say
that
specificity around your mountain, your own mountain, that's powerful. That's something I truly believe in, and I talk about a little bit. So many times we spend so much time looking at everybody else's mountains and looking at everybody else's climbs and looking at their ascents and look where they got to and look where they are. No, Louis is right. It's your mountain. You got to stay focused. That's just an amazing piece of advice. Stay focused on you. your journey is your journey. It's not somebody else's. They didn't come from where you came from. They don't have the background you came from. Don't worry about all of that. Set your own goals, your own standard. Be tough on yourself, aspire to the highest heights, but make sure that you are your judge, right? Don't give the power of your own self-validation away to somebody else. I don't care who they are, what title they may hold in the industry. Your mountain is your mountain. That's great advice.
Your mountain, your story. Well, while we've got you, we've got another question from the audience for you. Morel asks, how do you succeed in pitching a script or a TV show or film? What's the process behind that?
Well, I think that, I actually love the pitching process, because I love storytelling. I get very animated and I'm passionate about it. And I'm not going to pitch something if I'm not passionate about it. So I think that for me, I take that process very, very seriously. I think that you've got to go all the way in. I don't think you can just come in and to somebody and say, I got the story. It could be kind of good. It's about this. No, because if you don't believe it with your mind, body, and soul that this is the movie that you have to make, and you have to make it now, and you have to make it in this environment and with whatever budget and whatever resources and with this particular financer, if you are not coming in believing that 110%, why should they, right? You have to come in and be so clear and so definite and so passionate about it, because ultimately, typically, you're then pitching to somebody, and then it's got to go to a green light committee, and it's got to go to other people to talk about it. And by the time it gets there, it's going to be diffused anyway. So if you don't start red hot, that's just what I believe. I think you got to come in. And by the way, if you don't feel that way, don't pitch it. Pitch something else, right? Wait till you find the thing that you really, really believe in and you're passionate about. So I think that, if that was one piece of advice, I sometimes will hear pitches from filmmakers and I'm like, I don't know if I buy it, but I don't know if they buy it. If you're not 110% in, why should I be?
Yeah. That's that's a really good point. So I've been an indie filmmaker and I've been on the side of pitching at the pitching table. And now as an executive, I'm on the other side listening to the pitches. And I have had really bad pitches in my life where I have bored people to death. And it was, to Will's point, because I didn't have that passion. And I've been in the room with filmmakers when they're pitching a story to me and they are so excited. And even if it's a story I'm not really into, I want to help them. If it doesn't work for us, I'm like, oh, but that might work for Peacock, or that might, because they're so passionate about it, I'm looking to find ways to find it a home. Because I know if they're passionate about it, they're gonna make it. And if they're gonna make it, it's gonna be that we want it to be something great in the world. And I think that's such a good point, Will, that you really, when you pitch, if you're having a bad morning, try to, do some exercises, something to get your energy up, because if you go in with they're gonna feel it too, because we all have bad days, and so I think just try to not make that bad day the pitch day.
It's bad for you also, because say your pitch get bought, everything, you're stuck with it. That's what you're gonna do for 2 years. So if you're not passionate about it, you're gonna spend every day, 7 days a week, 20 hours a day working on, and not seeing your friends and family, and it feels like I'm kind of doing this, shooting from the hip. No, be passionate. Have this thing, because it's all you're going to eat, breathe, and then, and sleep on the couch forever. Literally, it's this, it's that. So be passionate.
No, seriously, it's so important to carry that energy through. We've got just a few minutes left, but I want to go back to Amanda, because you were talking about this at the beginning before we got started. We heard from John Leguizamo at the beginning of the summit, and as you're talking about pitching and taking the documentary through the process, that's such a compelling story where he's literally traveling the country in dialogue with characters. Can you tell us more about that documentary?
So John Leguizamo is the best. Honestly, a wonderful, wonderful human being. And he goes through 6 cities and shows us the contributions that Latinos have made to those cities, and we'll do it across America. And he goes, music, culture, art. He talks a lot of politics, all the things that we all talk about in our lives. But, he's doing it with his own flair. He's so funny, but he's also has a lot of heart. And I just love the series so much. It shows us spaces and places that aren't often seen on television, and I think it's a really important conversation, and a really, look, to what Will was saying way earlier, it's we've all talked about wanting to have diversity on screen for a long time, but that didn't necessarily meant it was showing up on television. And this series is one of the series that I'm just really proud of, because, you know, most of the crew was Latino. Like a lot of the, you know, I think it was 75% of the crew, I think, was Latino. And so it's representative not just in front of the screen, but behind the screen. And I think that's really important, that who's telling the story is also representative. You know, it's great to see the faces in front of the screen, but it's more important, in my opinion, for those faces to be behind the screen, because their perspectives really matter and really help shape these stories. And I think this series is really special, and I think it's universal. I think it's a series that everyone should watch, not just one group of people.
I want to get to one more question from Nindia at El Camino College. Hi, Nindia. What's your question?
She's blinked.
Oh, I think we might have lost a connection there, which means I get to throw in some more questions. I mean, I think we all know this is geared towards a lot of students at colleges that are thinking about their careers, and we got to talk a little bit about career advice, but we're also talking to people here or listening who are listening in who are in all levels of their career and different levels of their own mountain. Are there any other tips that you've been thinking about that you think would be important for them to learn if they're looking to get into film, storytelling of any facet? Anyone wants to jump in?
I think it's filmmaking of any kind, you know, animation, you know, documentary. It's like general culture. It's a sum of all skills. So learn every day, read, see everything. You know, go see Puss in Boots 3 times, like I did. Watch Amanda's documentaries, but really, like, you know, like, we are sponges, like, and you need to do this because if you sort of like stay close to your own little ideas and your own little world, and you don't work with enough people, you don't meet other people, then how can you bring real life on screen? And that's what it is. Like, you know, be open, just learn, be you know, and have fun. I mean, it's actually a really fun way to live your life. If you're always with your eyes open, wanting to do this, like, you know, you'll have a great life.
I also think it's really important to find a support system, like, you know, find your people and your friends, because it is a really tough industry to come up in, and especially if you didn't have access to it. You know, if you weren't from a family that, so it's like hard work to get into it. And I think if you can find the people and that you can just call every now and then and be like, this is really hard, and this is really frustrating, and this is really scary. It makes the journey a lot less lonely, and I think that's really important. And also, it tends to be that you end up working with those people later on in your life, so you just have this nice built-in family that just comes up with you, and I think that that's really great.
Yeah, it's a very small world.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's funny because I think that was when I was getting out of college and getting first job, like the advice I was getting was, be talented, but be nice and be good. Like, because the filmmaking, you collaborate so much, you have to work for a long time with people. And what's kind of cool to what you're just saying is like I ended up the production designer on Puss in Boots, Nate Ragg. He and I went to college. We were at school together at Cal Arts. The head of story, Heidi Jo Gilbert, she and I were in school together too. So we had this shorthand with each other. And then Daniel and I, like I mentioned, we worked as storyboard artists, but not always on the same movies. And then when we were kind of sharing an office back on Kung Fu Panda 2, is like we just hit it off, and to think like, oh man, we're directing it together. It's those friendships you make make their way into your work. Like.
And I think we do have Nindia back, so I want to make sure we can get her question in for you guys too. Cool. She's standing by at El Camino College at Cal State Fullerton. Oh, there. Hi, Nindia. What's your question?
Hi, my name is Nindia. I'm from El Camino College, and my question is for Amanda. What is it like for documentary future in television or broadcast? And I would also like to know, how does NBC choose documentary films to be featured?
I think the future is bright for documentaries, and I mean, with all the platforms and all the streaming platforms and broadcast, I think that documentary has a great future. You know, I mean, the audience is definitely growing. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, most people thought of documentaries and thought they were, photos and sit-down interviews. And as the genre has progressed and as it has evolved, I think we've built a larger audience. The streamers have definitely helped that. I mean, they definitely created a space for more entertaining documentaries, and so the documentaries that draw a bigger audience, and we are certainly using that in our space as well. And then if you have a documentary idea, I think it's really important to be very clear about it, put it together, put a pitch deck together. I'm going to get in the weeds here for a second. Like, get a pitch deck together, which is a visual of your story, and then if you can, shoot something that captures your story and put it together to show what it could be. I think that's really helpful. It is a visual medium, so I do think it's important to have something like that. And then you just reach out to me. I've taken cold pitches before that have from people I did not know, that were not from agents, that have turned into movies that have made it onto television. So it's not something that's insular. I'm open to hearing all ideas because I'm very aware that the best idea might be from somewhere outside of this small town in Hollywood or in New York. Some of the best ideas come from small towns across this country and throughout the world. So I'm very open. Now I'm going to get lots of pitches. I know that.
Give your phone number. Cell phone.
But that's okay because, the more interesting stories are from the places that we've never heard of. And so it's important for people to feel like they have access, and they're only going to have access if we're the ones who are willing to give it. Mm-hmm. Which, I am. So I'm fully aware that my inbox will have more pitches.
I think a bright future with the documentary world, with the film world, all around. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you all for taking the time. I really appreciate it. And big thank you to Will over in Atlanta for joining. Thanks also to our friends in Fullerton and North Miami for their questions, and the folks in the audience with their great questions as well.